You hear stories about precision bombing, clean hits, surgical strikes, buildings vaporized while neighbors stand untouched. But what happens when your own government orders a bomb through this front door of an office where your countrymen sit at desks? What happens when liberation requires 64 Dutch bodies burning in their workplace? April 11, 1944, The Hague, 6 mosquito bombers, a white villa called Kleikamp. Inside that villa, the Nazis stored 9 million identity card records. Every Dutch citizen over 15, photos, fingerprints, the master key to finding resistance fighters, Jews in hiding, anyone with forged papers. The building had to die, but so would everyone inside. Kunstsaal Kleikamp sat on Scheveningszijweg 17, directly across from the Peace Palace. Before the war, it was art and culture. Peter and Ermina Kleikamp ran exhibitions there since 1916. Modern art, Asian collections. Louis Couperus gave readings in those halls. The elite of the Hague Society gathered in that white mansion. Then May 1940, Germany invaded. By August 1941, the Nazis seized the building. The Reichsinspectie van de Bevolkingsregisters moved in, Central Population Registry. Every identity card duplicate in the Netherlands went into fireproof archive cabinets in that villa. The Sicherheitspolizei had unrestricted access. Any suspicious person could have their papers checked against the master copies. Forged cards meant death. The registry killed resistance fighters before they could act. It killed Jews trying to pass as Gentiles. It killed anyone the Reich wanted to find. If you value documented wartime operations and resistance history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual. Using sources from the Dutch National Archives, Hague's Gemeentearchief published April 2020 editors, the NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies database, updated through 2025. Traces of War Military History Archives, established 2011. And Operations Record Book Number 6, 1-3 Squadron held at the National Archives. Q reference AIR 27/2-117/30. These are primary source military records and Dutch archival documents from the actual operation. Now back to the information. July 1942. Gerrit Jan van der Veen and others established the Persoonsbewijzencentrale in Amsterdam, the PCB, identity card forgery at industrial scale. They produced 80,000 fake documents, but every forged card carried risk. The Gestapo could walk into any municipal office and request verification from Kleikamp. One telegram to Scheveningszijweg, 17, one check against the master files, the forgery collapses, the carrier dies. The PCB worked brilliantly until someone checked. Then Kleikamp destroyed them. March 27th, 1943. Resistance fighters bombed the Amsterdam Civil Registry. Willem Arandeus led 13 others. They destroyed part of the city's population records. 12 of them were executed on July 2nd, 1943. Arandeus was openly gay. His last words to his lawyer, Lauma Zarel, before execution, tell the world that homosexuals are no less courageous than anyone else. The Amsterdam attack worked partially, but it was local. Kleikamp held the National Shadow Archive, the Reich's central verification tool. Destroy Kleikamp and forged papers become nearly undetectable across the entire country. But the resistance couldn't reach it. The villa was heavily guarded, surrounded by a moat. Attacking it from the ground meant suicide. July 1943. Pierre-Louis Dalnis de Bourrouille parachuted into the Netherlands. Born December the 26th, 1918 in Delft, studied law, mobilized in 1937, escaped to England after the invasion, trained as a secret agent with help from Prince Bernhard, dropped behind enemy lines to become the communications officer between Dutch resistance and the government in exile in London. Dalnis saw the Kleikamp problem immediately. Permanent forgery impossible. German sympathizers in the inspection department verified everything against those master files. The resistance needed those records gone. December 16th, 1943. Dalnis transmitted his request to Dutch intelligence in London. The telegram text: permanent forgery of the personal identity cards impossible because a governmental inspection department manned by German sympathizers of the population registry holds copies of all real data. It has been established that these copies are exclusively and completely saved in a housing in The Hague. Destruction of same not possible by us. In case RAF destroys these archives, we will be able to forge the municipal registry, which will make many persons legal. The message traveled across occupied Europe, through resistance networks, encoded to London. The Dutch government in exile received it. They debated for months. The RAF initially resisted. Precision bombing a civilian office building in a dense neighborhood, high collateral damage risk. Questionable effectiveness. Paper in fireproof cabinets might survive, but the Dutch government pushed. The registry had to burn. Dahlness believed only Nazi collaborators worked at Clay Camp. NSB members, National Socialist Movement, the Dutch Fascist Party. He assumed everyone inside deserved what was coming. Wartime made him cold about death. He said years later, in wartime you become somewhat insensitive about deaths. You see them regularly around you. In that intelligence work people die everywhere. But he was wrong about who worked there. Most employees were ordinary Dutch civil servants. Some were resistant sympathizers. Some actively helped forge documents on the inside. A small number were NSB, maybe 5 sympathizers according to survivors, one department head named Jacob Lentz. A friendly man who did no harm according to Klaasje de Graaf van Houten, an employee who started there in 1937 and moved to Clay Camp in 1941. But London didn't care. The potential deaths didn't outweigh the advantage. That was the conclusion after months of debate between the Dutch government and the Royal Air Force. The RAF agreed. 613 Squadron got the assignment, part of No. 2 Group, 2nd Tactical Air Force. The squadron had converted to de Havilland Mosquito fighter bombers in October 1943, moved to RAF Lasham in Hampshire. Fast twin-engine aircraft, mostly wood construction, exceptional speed and maneuverability, perfect for precision low-level strikes. Wing Commander Robert Norman Bateson took command in February 1944, born June 10th, 1912 in Watford, grammar school education, joined RAF July 1936, short service commission, flew Hawker Heinz with No. 1, 1-3 Squadron, posted to Egypt, converted to Bristol Blenheims, commanded No. 2, 1-1 Squadron in the Far East during 1942. Combat veteran, the kind of pilot you send when failure means disgrace. The operation was classified as special. Mock-ups were built, scale models of Clay Camp and surrounding Hague streets. The pilots trained on replicas, studied every chimney, every roofline. High-ranking Air Force officers attended the mission briefing on the morning of April 11th. They emphasized, the target is of great political importance and total destruction of it is of essential value. The timing was deliberate. Tuesday, working day, mid-afternoon at 14:55. Archive cabinets would be open, identity cards on desks, maximum paper exposure, maximum fire damage, and maximum casualties among the staff. 6 Mosquitoes, LR-355, flown by Wing Commander Robert Bateson with Flying Officer B. Standish as navigator. LR-376, flown by Flight Lieutenant Peter Cobley with Flying Officer G. Williams. NS-844, flown by Squadron Leader C. NI-408, flown by Flying Officer Robert Cohen with Flight Sergeant Peter Deeves. Cohen was 21, Dutch, Jewish, studied at Delft University, escaped the Netherlands with a fellow student between June 19th and 22nd Ta. 1941, crossed the North Sea in a canoe, reached England, volunteered for the RAF. Now he was flying home to bomb his own countrymen to save other countrymen. LR-366, flown by Flight Lieutenant V. Hester with Flying Officer R. Burkett. 6 aircraft total, 12 men. Takeoff 13:05 hours Greenwich, meantime. April 11th, 1944, RAF Swanton Morley, Norfolk. The formation flew low across the North Sea. Parts of Holland were flooded, inundated by both Germans and Allies. The landscape looked like marshland. Navigation was difficult. Bateson later reported, "We flew very low. The inundation of certain parts of the country, looking like marshes, did not help to make it easier to find our way. At first we thought to be over the wrong coastal area, but when we finally managed to find our way, all went smooth. On the mock-up, we had paid especially attention to a number of chimneys, but when we arrived at the spot, we saw so many chimneys that we didn't trust too much on those marks." He climbed to 700 meters, looked around, spotted the Peace Palace Tower 6 kilometers away. That was the landmark. Descended again, lined up the approach. The Hague, Easter Monday aftermath. Paul Valkenburg was 14 years old, lived next door to Clay Camp. Standing outside with a friend. Then the noise, tremendous roar, sirens, multiple explosions, aircraft screaming past at rooftop level, lower than he'd ever seen planes over the city. The Mosquitoes came in with the sun behind them, flying along the Peace Palace toward Clay Camp, equipped with special bomb racks for small high explosive and incendiary bombs, flying lower than Clay Camp's roofline. Bateson's first bomb hit precisely. Through the front door, according to the pilots, exactly as trained on the mock-up, a practice bombing run gone live. The White Villa erupted. Inside Clay Camp, approximately 100 employees were working. Typists, office workers, registry clerks. Ages ranging from 17 to over 50. Agnes Ondeville, 26, typist from Rijswijk. Died instantly around 1,500 hours according to death certificate. A 904, The first wave dropped high explosives, opened the building, blew out walls, exposed the interior. The second wave came seconds later. Incendiaries, fire bloomed. The villa became an inferno within seconds. Debris buried workers at their desks. Fire consumed papers, furniture, bodies. Some employees were trapped in the basement. The basement flooded with firefighting water. They drowned underground while the building burned above them. Valkenburg and his friend ran toward Clay Camp to help. While they were running, 2 more aircraft came from behind at tremendous speed. More bombs fell. The surrounding buildings took damage. Valkenburg and his friend survived. 64 Dutch citizens did not. 56 Clay Camp employees. 1 police sergeant named Arie van der Veer, who was on guard. 2 civilians, including the concierge's wife. 4 employees of the Netherlands Octrooibureau, the Dutch patent office next door, including a 17-year-old. 4 German police officers at the nearby Alexander Kaserne barracks. The average age of the 64 Dutch victims was just under 30 years. 38 men, 26 women. Jacob Lentz, the NSB department head, dead. Klaasje de Graaf van Houten's colleagues, dead. People who helped forge identity cards inside the system, dead. People who just processed paperwork for the occupiers because they needed jobs, dead. The moral calculations of resistance warfare compressed into burning rubble. All 6 Mosquitoes completed the mission without losses. Not a single aircraft was hit. The Germans were caught completely by surprise. An escort group of Spitfires waited to guide the formation home safely. Bateson reported, "We escaped as a matter of speech without a shot being fired at us." The Germans had no idea of what was happening. Only at the very end did anti-aircraft fire come up. Too late. The bombers were gone. The destruction was total. The White Villa reduced to smoking ruins, the surrounding neighborhood damaged, but the archive, the underground newspaper, Trouw, reported on May 15th. 1944. The building contained the entire administration of the Central Population Registry of the Netherlands, including the infamous identity card registry of all men and women of 15 years and older, with their photos and fingerprints. This collection has been lost to a considerable extent, estimated at approximately 40%, further completely destroyed. 1. The Central Population Registry of persons who are without known residence or have left the country abroad. 2. The Central Population Registry for ship captains and traveling and wandering population, including caravan dwellers. 3. All correspondence with municipalities over questionable points with municipalities whose officials are in hiding. 40%, less than half. Many identity cards and documents survived inside the fireproof archive cabinets, protected from falling debris, protected from fire. The Germans cleared the surviving documents from the ruins in the following weeks, moved them elsewhere. The registry continued functioning. But the effectiveness dropped massively. Clay Camp staff who died took institutional knowledge with them. The surviving records were disorganized. Verification requests took longer. Many went unanswered. Forged identity cards became much safer to carry. Hundreds of people in hiding got new false papers. Resistance fighters operated more freely. The Jewish deportations were already almost complete by April 1944. Most Dutch Jews had been murdered, but for those still hiding, for resistance members, for anyone targeted by the Reich, Clay Camp's destruction bought time and safety. If you value documented resistance operations and the moral complexity of wartime decisions like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the workgroup Den Hague into Tweede Wereldoorlog's published victim list from April 11, 2020, documenting 59 confirmed casualties with names, ages, and death certificates. And the NIOD frequently asked questions database on Allied bombing raids listing Clay Camp as intended target with about 60 deaths. Primary documentation, archival death records. Now back to the information. May 8th, 1944, Prince Bernhard presented the Fliegerkreuz, the Dutch Flying Cross, to Wing Commander Bateson. The award had been approved by Royal Decree No. 12 on April 20th. Bateson received the honor for demonstrated courage and determination during the secret operation. Dalnes de Beruil received the Militair Willems Ord, the Netherlands' highest military honor, Knight of the Military Order of William, for the man who called in the bombing, the man who assured London that only collaborators would die, the man who was wrong. The controversy started immediately. Algemeen Handelsblad newspaper called it a unique feat of arms on April 9th, verse 1949, 5 years after the raid. The article didn't mention the 64 Dutch dead, as if precision made it clean, as if the target justified the cost. But people who lived through it asked questions. Valkenburg wondered, even while fighting the fires, why didn't they do this 2 years earlier? In the spring of 1944, the vast majority of the Jewish population had already been deported. Many people in hiding had already been caught. The timing was late, too late for thousands. The deportation trains had already rolled. Amateur historian Henk Kulder spent 3 years researching the bombing. He was 13 years old the day it happened, playing outside. Heard the dull thuds in the distance. A firebomb landed 8 meters from him, nearly burned him alive. He escaped. Decades later, he investigated, published his findings in 2019. His conclusion? The Dutch government in exile deliberately murdered Dutch civil servants in service of the occupier. The RAF had initially refused to bomb. One argument, destroying the intended paper probably wouldn't work. Kilder found a letter from the RAF to the Dutch liaison officer warning about this. The Dutch government knew destroying documents would be difficult, yet they ordered a daylight raid during working hours. According to Kilder, the unofficial goal was destruction of the building of the inspection and its employees. Not just the files, the people. The Neo-D Institute disputes this despite the evidence. They argue the letter doesn't discuss the timing issue. But they acknowledge the question. Was the number of casualties justifiable as a high price for destroying the registry? That question remains unanswered. The moral arithmetic doesn't balance. 64 Dutch lives, 40% of files destroyed, thousands of resistance members and Jews saved from detection. How do you calculate that? Dahlness himself struggled with it. After the war, he said, "I am co-responsible for a bombing where 59 Dutchmen were killed, including agents of the same organization that also introduced false identity papers into Clay Camp." He carried that weight. The knowledge that resistance sympathizers died in the attack he called in. People who were helping from the inside. One survivor was Miss van der Laar, who worked at Clay Camp since 1920. She told researchers there were maybe 5 NSB sympathizers. One department head who had been a sympathizer before the war, a friendly, nice man who did no harm. That was Jacob Lentz. He died in the bombing. The narrative that Clay Camp was full of traitors was false. Most were ordinary people, civil servants. Some actively resisted from inside the bureaucracy. Some provided intelligence to the resistance. Some helped insert false documents into the system. They died alongside the collaborators. The debate about whether to bomb continued in London for 4 months. December 16th, 1943, when Dahlness sent his request until April 11th. 1944, when the bombs fell. 4 months of discussion. The RAF analyzing feasibility. The Dutch government weighing political importance against civilian casualties. Communication between London and occupied Netherlands was difficult. Information about the actual staff composition at Clay Camp was limited. Dahlness relied on assumptions. The government relied on Dahlness. The decision was made with incomplete intelligence. The effectiveness question haunted everyone, only 40% destroyed. The building was ruined, but many files survived. The Germans adapted, moved the remaining records. The Gestapo continued operations, but the disruption mattered. The institutional knowledge lost mattered. Every Clay Camp employee who died knew the filing system, knew how to cross-reference records, knew which municipalities had suspicious registration patterns. That expertise couldn't be replaced quickly. The surviving files were less useful without the people who understood them. Verification requests slowed. Many went unfulfilled. The Reich's panopticon vision of perfect population control degraded. Not destroyed. Degraded. The Nederlandse Octrooi Bureau, the patent office, shared the building complex with Clay Camp. 4 NLO employees died, including the 17-year-old. The office was directly behind Clay Camp. When the first 2 pilots planted their bombs in the middle of the target building, there wasn't a building to bomb anymore for the second and third groups. Their bombs flew into surrounding structures. One crashed into NLO. Herman Dendels, one of the firm's directors, was trapped in his room when bombs hit. He survived. 4 of his colleagues didn't. Collateral damage in a precision strike. The terminology sanitizes. 4 people burned or crushed to death because they worked next to a target. The bombing happened the day after Easter, Easter Monday. April 10th was Easter Sunday. The villa full of Dutch employees went to church, celebrated resurrection, returned to work on Tuesday. By 1500 hours, 64 of them were dead. The irony of the calendar, the Nazis used Christian holidays for cover too. Attacked when defenses were low. The Allies bombed during Easter week. War doesn't pause for sacred time. Radio Oranje, the Dutch government broadcast from London, reported the raid on May 6, 1944. Dutch Lieutenant Pilot Robert Cohen gave an account of the mission. His voice transmitted across occupied Europe, telling Dutch listeners what happened to their national registry, telling them resistance was possible, telling them the government in exile was fighting, not mentioning the Dutch dead, not mentioning the employees who burned. That silence was strategic. Morale required martyrdom to look clean. The mock-ups built for training were detailed. Perfect replicas of Clay Camp's facade, every window, Every architectural detail, the pilots studied them obsessively, flew practice runs against the models, memorized approach angles. The preparation was extraordinary for a single building strike. The importance was that high, the margin for error that low. Missing meant flying back across the North Sea in failure. Hitting surrounding neighborhoods meant civilian massacre. Hitting Clay Camp meant killing Dutch people to save other Dutch people. Precision was moral necessity. They hit precisely enough to kill exactly who was inside. The Algemeen Handelsblad article from April 9th, 1949 called it unique without irony. 5 years post-war. The Netherlands was rebuilding. The occupation was being mythologized. Resistance elevated. Collaboration punished. Complexity erased. The Clay Camp bombing fit the narrative. Daring RAF raid. Strategic target. Successful mission. The 64 Dutch dead faded into footnotes. The 40% destruction rate became secondary. The story needed to be heroic. Messy truth about civil servants burning at their desks didn't fit, but the families of the dead knew. 64 families lost someone. Mothers, fathers, children, siblings, friends, Agnes Ondeville's family, the 17-year-old patent office worker's family. All the others, they got death certificates, they buried bodies or fragments. They asked why. Why during working hours? Why when most Jews were already gone? Why when 40% survival rate was predictable? Why their family member? The answers were strategic. The calculus was cold. Your loved one died so forged papers would work better. Your loved one died so institutional knowledge would vanish. Your loved one died because London decided it was worth it. Wing Commander Bateson continued his career, led the Operation Carthage raid on Shell House in Copenhagen, March 21st, 1945, Gestapo headquarters, another precision strike. More Danish prisoners held on upper floors, more human shields, more moral calculations. Bateson became known as Pinpoint, the man who could put a bomb through a front door, the man who turned buildings into ash. He received the Distinguished Service Order in April 1944. A bar to the DSO in June 1945. Eventually, Air Vice Marshal, retired with honors, companion of the Most Honorable Order of the Bath in 1964. He died March 6, 1986. His obituaries called him a war hero, mentioned Clay Camp, mentioned Copenhagen, praised precision, glossed over bodies. Pierre-Louis d'Aulnay de Bourrouille survived the war, continued military service, rose through ranks, became one of the few living knights of the Military Order of William, gave interviews in later years, acknowledged his role, acknowledged his guilt, said he was co-responsible, said wartime made him insensitive about deaths, but he also said he knew the greater importance. He believed then that it was necessary, lived with that belief and that guilt until his death on May 24th, 2012. He was 93, carried Clay Camp for 68 years. The survivors carried it differently. Klaasje de Graaf van Houten described her colleagues, said most weren't NSB, said they were ordinary people. She survived because she wasn't at work that day. Survivor's guilt is specific. Why did I live when they burned? Paul Valkenburg saw the planes, ran toward the fire, tried to help, couldn't save anyone, watched Clay Camp become ruins, asked why not 2 years earlier, lived with that question. The ones who died inside had no time for questions. The bombs came at 1500 hours. The building collapsed in seconds. Fire moved fast. Some died from blast, some from debris, some from fire, some from drowning in basement water. Speed didn't make it merciful, it made it efficient. The memorial stone was unveiled June 3rd. 1946. Minister P.J. Whitteman presided. The stone was placed in the Ministry of Home Affairs building at Binnenhof. 19. Sculptor W. Van Horn from Amsterdam created it. The stone listed 76 names, personnel from the department itself. From the inspection of population registries, including deceased spouses, from the National Service in Arnhem, from the CBVO, later called National Service for Social Welfare. Of the 62 listed from the inspection, 58 died in the Clay Camp bombing. The memorial moved with the ministry, first to Shetteldokeshaven from 1978 to 2012, then to Turfmarkt. It stands in the hall today. Names carved in stone, ages not mentioned, circumstances sanitized. Today, the head office of an IBC bank sits where Clay Camp stood. Scheveningsweg, 17. A monument called Messages from the Past Century stands next to the main entrance. Across from the Peace Palace, the irony holds, the Peace Palace watches the memorial to a precision bombing that killed 64 Dutch people to disrupt Nazi records. The juxtaposition is deliberate or accidental, depending on who you ask. The memorial text is brief, doesn't elaborate, doesn't judge, just states, on the 11th April 1944, the RAF bombed the Royal Art Hall Clay Camp with precision. This villa was at that point the central population register. Besides the total destruction of the building and nearby objects, there were also 61 casualties. The number varies: 61, 59, 64, depending on whether you count the patent office victims. The German police, the civilian bystanders, numbers matter. Each number is a name. Each name is a person who went to work on Tuesday and didn't come home. The 40% survival rate haunts the operation's legacy. Less than half destroyed. The Reich adapted. The registry continued in diminished form. Was it worth 64 deaths for 40% reduction in Nazi verification capability? The resistance said yes. Dahlness said yes with guilt. The Dutch government said yes and ordered it. The RAF said yes and flew it. Bateson said yes and led it. Cohen said yes and bombed his homeland. The families of the dead didn't get asked. They got death certificates and strategic explanations and national gratitude for sacrifice they didn't choose. The Jewish population of the Netherlands was 75% murdered, 140,000 of 160,000, the highest percentage in Western Europe. The efficiency was Dutch. The municipal registry system was precise. The population records were detailed. The Germans used Dutch bureaucracy against Dutch Jews. Kleikamp was the master tool, but by April 1944, most Dutch Jews were already dead. Auschwitz, Sobibor, Bergen-Belsen. The bombing came too late to save them. It saved resistance fighters. It saved people in hiding who weren't Jewish. It saved future operations. It didn't save the 75% already murdered. The silence about the Holocaust in Radio Oranje broadcasts bothers historians. The Dutch government in exile received information about extermination camps in 1944. They didn't broadcast it. They didn't warn. They didn't acknowledge genocide while it happened. The same government that ordered Kleikamp bombed to protect resistance fighters. The same government that received Dahlness's telegram. They knew. They stayed silent about the camps. They spoke about the registry bombing. Priorities were calculated. Some lives mattered strategically. Some deaths were speakable. Others weren't. The Central Archives of the Special Jurisdiction opened digitally in January 2025. Cabr, 425,000 names. Suspected collaborators, NSB members, people investigated for working with Germans, 2.4 miles of documents, 30 million pages. Available online after 80 years, the database doesn't specify guilt or innocence, just lists names. Jacob Lentz might be there. The 5 Kleikamp NSB sympathizers might be there. So might people who were investigated falsely. The nuance gets lost in databases. Listed equals suspected. Suspected equals guilty in public memory. The Kleikamp employees who died are in a different archive. The memorial stone, death certificates, victim list compiled by the workgroup Den Haag into Tweede Wereldoorlog, 59 names in alphabetical order, ages, addresses, death dates, causes, shot, burned, crushed, drowned, each entry clinical, each entry a life ended by strategic calculation. The NIOD database lists Kleikamp under Allied bombing raids with around 60 deaths. Intended target, successful hit, considerable casualties. Next entry is Roosendaal. May 31st, 1944, railway station area, 73 deaths. Intended target, but most bombs missed. Then Maastricht, residential area, 91 deaths, unintended outcome. The intended bridge remained intact. The list continues. Breskens, Wolfheze, Edde, Biggekerke, Huissen, Westkapelle. Operation Market Garden airstrikes. The Netherlands was bombed by both sides. Germans bombed Rotterdam, May 10th through 14th, 1940. 800 to 900 civilians dead. The Luftwaffe counterattacks during Market Garden. American and British daylight raids, RAF night raids, 600 Allied bombing missions over Dutch soil during occupation, 40 raids, caused 40 or more civilian casualties. Kleikamp sits in that list. Intended target, precision attack, 64 Dutch dead, successful mission. The 21st aircraft of No. 613 Squadron didn't all survive the war. Many Mosquitoes were lost on subsequent missions. Many crews died. Peter Cobley, who flew LR-376 at Kleikamp, B. Standish, who navigated for Bateson, G. Williams, V. Hester, R. Burkett, Robert Cohen, Peter Deeves. Some survived, some didn't. The records fragment. War consumed them beyond Kleikamp. Squadron 613 disbanded August 7th, 1945 at Cambrai-Epinoy, France, renumbered as No. 69. Squadron reformed May 10th, 1946 at RAF Ringway, Auxiliary Air Force, equipped with Spitfires, lasted until March 10th, 1957, final disbandment. The squadron that bombed Kleikamp exists now only in records and memories, and one memorial stone across from the Peace Palace. The moral question persists. Was Kleikamp justified? 64 deaths, 40% effectiveness, hundreds saved by better forged papers, institutional knowledge destroyed, Reich verification capability degraded. The mathematics seems straightforward. 64 to save hundreds. Utilitarian calculus, but each death was individual. Agnes Onderwiel, 26 typist, she didn't calculate ratios. She went to work. The 17-year-old patent office worker, no name recorded in some lists, just age, the youngest victim. What would that teenager have become? What did that future cost? The saved hundreds never met the dead, 64, never looked at their faces, never knew their names. They just carried better forged papers and survived because Clay Camp burned. Dallness's telegram from December 16th. 1943 contained a promise. In case RAF destroys these archives, we will be able to forge the municipal registry, which will make many persons legal. Legal. That word, not safe, not hidden. Legal. Able to exist in Nazi-occupied Netherlands with papers that pass inspection. Able to move. Able to work. Able to survive. The word held desperate hope. The price was unnamed in the telegram. 64 Dutch lives burning so others could be legal. The price was calculated later in London. Accepted. Ordered. Executed with precision. The final document is soil itself. Clay Camp's ruins. Cleared after the war. The site rebuilt. A bank now. But the ground remembers. Debris buried under modern foundations. Ash mixed in earth. The Peace Palace across the street stands unchanged. Built for international justice. Opened 1913. Designed for arbitration between nations, the palace watched the Nazis arrive, watched Clay Camp transform from art gallery to death registry, watched 6 mosquitoes come in low on April 11th, 1944, watched the White Villa burn. The palace is still there, still standing for justice. The irony deepens. Clay Camp was precision justice, RAF justice, Dutch government justice, strategic justice. 64 people died in its name. The Peace Palace observed across the street, silent witness. The juxtaposition asks, what is justice in war? What is peace in occupation? What is the cost of resistance? The answers burned in Clay Camp. 40% of files destroyed. 64 lives ended. Hundreds saved. No clean mathematics. Just smoke rising over the Hague and pilots flying home and families receiving death certificates and strategic necessity grinding forward over bodies at desks. The documents survive in archives. The operations record book at Kew. The death certificates at Hague's Gemeenteraarchief, the NIOD database, the workgroup victim list, traces of war military histories, Ondertijden documentary from October 23rd, 2008, Henk Kulders research published 2019, Dutch newspaper articles from 1944 and 1949 and 2020, primary sources, archival records, testimony from survivors, the paper trail of precision bombing. The accountability is documented. We know who ordered it. We know who flew it. We know who died. We know the percentage destroyed. We know the strategic value. We know the moral cost. The documents don't resolve it. They just record it. History preserves without judgment. 64 Dutch people burned to death at Scheveningen-Zeeweg, 17 on April 11th, 1944 at 1500 hours, because their government decided it was strategically necessary. That sentence is factual. That sentence is complete. That sentence contains everything and explains nothing. The Peace Palace still stands across the street watching where Clay Camp used to be.